Hi, it's Dr. Parikh, and we are talking about results, which would be super exciting if you had real results, but it's only somewhat exciting because you don't have real results. That makes it both easier and harder to write about. It's hard because it's hypothetical, but it's easier because everybody's the same. So I can just kind of give you the format and you can plug in your pieces to make it work. So this is the outline for the results section, and you're more or less going to, this outline is the minimum needed. So this is the absolute minimum, but it's the minimum. You don't typically need to put in more. And actually for the results section in particular, I would say do not put in more. Something like the method, maybe there would be some extra things that would be useful, but again, don't be too ambitious. Just writing a good quality paper is plenty challenge enough. You don't need to do anything special. Your work will be special just because it will be you writing a research proposal. That's special enough. So now that we've had the everyone is a snowflake speech, so your results section starts with a reminder of your hypothesis. I know we do a lot of reminding, but when you look back at your articles, notice how much repetition there was. You probably didn't notice so much when you were reading it for the first time because you needed that much repetition to understand what they were saying. Science is hard. It just is. So you're going to briefly, as a full sentence. Now what's different is that results you're trying to be more general. So instead of instead of using the name of my measure, so instead of saying post-traumatic checklist civilian, I would just say, levels of PTSD. So you're going to use general terms, and that's true throughout. Just like in the beginning, when you said the present study paragraph, you hadn't introduced these measures yet, and so you couldn't use their names. And it's kind of like you're trying to go back to the broad and neutral now after being really technical in your measures. The next thing you're going to do is give what are called descriptive statistics. So this is descriptive in that you're just telling me about who was in this study. And you're going to give, the mean and the standard deviation. You'll notice here I have MSD. And in the next video, I'll talk a little more about that, about how to talk around statistics and results. So you're going to give one type of statistics for age and anything else that has a number, because you can make an average, like you can make an average age, an average IQ. You can't make an average gender or an average race because those are categories. So you have two different sentences or two different phrases where you talk about descriptive statistics. So next you'll talk about frequencies and percentages. So that's the N and the percent for things like sex, race. You might do that for like anxiety disorder status, marital status, things like that. So if you can have twice as much of something as someone else, that's definitely not a category. So like I can have twice as much age or twice as much weight as someone else. So those are numbers that I would list up here under descriptive statistics with the mean and standard deviation. The fourth section is analysis. And this is going to be pretty straightforward. You're all doing a t-test. That's on purpose. So you stuck with the boring t-test so that in this moment, I could tell you, use this phrasing. And I wouldn't have to say, if you're doing this, use that. If you're doing that, use that one. I can give you fairly standard phrasing. And I give you several examples. As a note, t-test gets italicized a very specific way. And I do take off points if you're not italicizing it correctly. Next, you're going to name what the independent variable is. And I give you several phrases to choose from. So that way it's not, it doesn't feel so much like you're just copying exactly what I'm telling you. And you should never sit and just absolutely copy from someone else's results section. But what you will do is you'll look at a few examples and you'll take bits and pieces from each one for this, because the way you talk about statistics is fairly standard and straightforward. And so you'll read, a few that are all going to be fairly similar, and you're going to kind of figure out something that's in the middle. So it's a little different from how I treat plagiarism, say, in the literature review, but at the same time, you do want to make sure that you're not using exactly the same paragraph every single time, that you are, that it's this fine balance between being standard enough to be easy to understand while still having academic integrity, still kind of making it your own. And so one way I let you make it your own is I give you several phrases to choose from, and then you'll plug in your actual independent variable. So you're going to, at the end, you'll say how you grouped them, whatever the independent variable was. Now in this case, if you are using it, now you're being specific. So when you talk about the hypothesis, you're general. You talk about the concept, so like intelligence. Whereas when you're talking about the independent variable, you're talking about a specific, like how you operationalized it, how you measured it in this case. So you would say, so in the hypothesis, you talk about intelligence. When you're talking about the independent variable, you would say something like groups will be divided based on their scores on the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. Next is the dependent variable. So again, same thing. There's a few phrases to choose from, and then you're going to add on a very precise description of your outcome or dependent variable. So it'd be something like, group differences will be measured on the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. Finally, results. Now, obviously, you don't have results, but you're going to say at least what the bar that you're setting is. And this will, again, make sense, hopefully, when you take stats. Hopefully, this will kind of ring a bell and you'll say, oh, I get what Dr. Parikh was talking about. So you're going to make some sort of statement about how you're going to determine the outcome. And so there's kind of two choices. You're going to follow it exactly, including spacing and italics, and when there's a zero and when there's not a zero. APA has rules for a lot of these things. Results will be considered significant for p-values below 0.05, or the significance level for the t-test will be set at p of less than 0.05. Either one is fine. They say exactly the same thing. And this is how you can kind of see, you don't have to say exactly the same thing every time, but you do need to kind of follow the formula, the steps of how things go in. This is a very simple paragraph because I forced you to keep your research questions simple so that you would have an easy time with the method section, but particularly with the results. And that's going to flow down to the discussion, because the more complicated your hypothesis is, the more complicated your discussion gets. So let's look for a moment. You can see an example of the template. It's actually a pretty, it feels like all this buildup, and then the results paragraph itself is quite short. So it's very straightforward. You can read it for yourself. And I just say mean and standard deviation will be reported for age. Frequencies and percentages will be reported for sex, marital status, and income level. Now, income level might seem funny because that's a number. I can have twice as much income as you. But remember, I said that I was going to measure income level by $10,000 increments, from 0 to 10,000, 10,000 to 20,000, 20,000 to 30,000, all the way up to more than 150,000. I took what could have been a number and made it into a category. And that's first, I made that decision intentionally because I want to group people more broadly, and I also thought it would be a little more comfortable for people to report a range rather than their precise income. So I made that choice, but the consequence is I now have a category instead of a number. And as you learn more about statistics, that's kind of a problem sometimes. So that's the results section. It is so formulaic. It's good that it's formulaic because writing about stats is hard, which will take us into our next video. See you in a minute. Thanks. Bye.